Hi, my name is Greene. In 1971, my parents moved here to Craigavon. I spent my teenage years growing up here and became very interested in the punks and the mods and the rockers, the youth cultures that were prevalent in the 1980s in Craigavon. Every area had its own subculture. So this is Tully Galley. This is where the Skins hung out. This was the local disco behind. Now it's not, it's just a shop. It used to be a disco here. And on Friday nights, all the Skins would have their moon stomped down here. This was the only place where Skins hung out in Craigavon. Going anywhere else, a bit dangerous. This is the old Portadown Road. In the early 80s, I was a mod. To my left used to be Moylin, where mods hung out. Along this road, we used to drive scooters up and down very fast, very illegally, with no helmets on. This is where the mods were ostracised too. Couldn't really go into Craigavon because they were pretty much hated by everyone. This is Moy Rafferty. This is where most of the punks would sort of have came from in this area. This was my first time I would bump into punks. So it was a bit more accepting here, I suppose, as opposed to other places where you had to be part of a specific tribe. This is Drumagora. This is where the rockers hung out. I was so afraid of this place for half of the 80s when I was a mod. Couldn't come over here. It's kind of exposed. If you're walking back from the shopping centre, the chances of getting run by the mortal enemies of the mods, the rockers, it's just too much hassle. And it's a lovely area. This is a really nice area, Drumagora Park and stuff. Lots of really nice people from around here. But in the early 80s, this was Rockerville, like, and you could not hang out here if you were a mod. So by the mid-80s, having had my fill of being a mod and being sort of disillusioned by punk music, there was a new sort of subgroup that started to appear. They didn't have a name. There was cats that liked bands like Orange Juice, postcard bands like Aztec Camera, strange, small little records that came out. And there were some lads that lived around here, and I idolised them. They were in a band called the Texans. They all had quiffs. They wore suede jackets, Davy Crockett hats, smoked Galois, French cigarettes, although it wasn't really French cigarettes, there was Regal King Size in them or something like that. But I would see these lads, and I befriended some of them. I ended up playing in a band with them when I was 16, but they became what would be known as indie kids. This was in like 1985, and indie didn't really exist. It was just post-punk. For me, that was it. I'd found the music that I'd always wanted to find. I couldn't describe it, but as soon as I started to hear bands like the Stooges and the MC5, bands like Sonic Youth, that was it. I was hooked. I knew this was the music that I would love for the rest of my life, and that would define me for the rest of my life. At that time, they were so odd. They looked like a cross between Teddy Boys and mods and rockers. They had a little bit of everything, but this very definite style. They didn't exist anywhere else. Nowadays, if you saw these people, they would fit in perfectly. And this is 30 years later. In the mid-80s, they stood out and they looked so cool, and that was it for me. So this was like, for me, this was the birth of like my indie experience, my independent experience. And for us, growing up in a new town, where you sort of felt displaced, you weren't part of like a deep-rooted community. You weren't from Lurgan, you weren't from Portadown. You know, there was a lot of kids from Belfast and from Derry and from wherever, Vietnam, Uganda, just off the top of my head, thinking of kids that lived around here. So it was perfect for us to sort of like stamp our own identity on something completely new. So this was our indie crucible, if you will.